Okay. What did he say?
Well, good morning to everyone, and welcome to Kiwanis on Friday. Can you hear me? I had a feeling it might be on loud, okay? Okay, we'll turn it down just a bit. Good to see all of you today. Kids need Kiwanis, and Kiwanis needs you. And I'm glad each of you are here today, not only in person, but the people on the screen. Let's stand for our defining statement to begin with. Kiwanis is a global organization of volunteers dedicated to improving the world, one child and one community at a time. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our song today, Clay, do you have a song for us?
I do. It's one we have tried a couple of times before. So you need to know that you need the book, and you need to go to page 38 at the bottom in the good old summertime.
And you're positive that Johnny Mac Alexander did not pick this one, is that correct?
That is totally correct.
Fantastic. All righty. Go ahead.
Okay, we'll go with a pitch of in the good old summertime, in the good old summertime, strolling through the shady lane with your baby mine. Over and she goes yours, and that's a very good sign. That she's your Tootsie Lucy in the good old summertime.
Oh, I tell you, there's no doubt you needed the book for that one. You needed the book for that one. Our invocation now. Win Vass will have our invocation.
Let us pray. Inspire us today with qualities of good leadership. Give us insight to make wise decisions, integrity to face the truth, courage to make difficult choices, and compassion for the needs of others. We ask you bless this food to our use and us to your service. Amen.
Does anyone have any guests today? I see you back there. Stand up and introduce those two young future members.
I have two prospective members for the year 2040, perhaps. William Clay Blackwell IV and Juliana Estelle Blackwell. They are my children, a rising first grader and fourth grader, and Zara is at home.
Thank you for being here. Thank you, kids, for being with us. Does anyone else have guests today? Well, we appreciate everyone being with us. Thank you so much. Let's move straight to membership welfare. I had an email from Randy Hartley. He underwent double hernia surgery this week. It's Randy Hartley. He did that on Tuesday. He's at home now. He's resting. And they're saying that his recovery time will be about 6 weeks. So please remember him during that 6-week period, not only in your prayers, but with your phone calls and visits. Also, Courtney's husband has finished radiation. He's beginning chemotherapy. He's doing as well as can be expected. Again, Courtney's husband, what's his first name? Jeff Allen. Jeff Allen needs your prayers and your thoughts during this time. Are there any other announcements concerning our memberships? Our membership. Birthdays. Oh, okay. But any other members we need to be thinking about? If not, please think of the ones we talked about. Birthdays are up on the board. Take a look at it. We've got a number of people celebrating birthdays this month. We want to wish happy birthday to everyone that has a birthday this month. Announcements. Some of our folks served at the Salvation Army last Friday, Robbie and Bob. We appreciate that. Fourth Friday of this month, we're going to need more volunteers. Hugh Grice is chairing our food collection this year. Hugh, how is that going?
Hey, everybody. You guys got to hear from Mel. He is running the Child Hunger Program through the Interfaith Food Shuttle this summer. They're doing like 600 meals a day. They have a captive audience of children through the Wake County summer camp programs, and then they also have sponsored a bunch of summer camps doing things like art and science for the kids in the summer. So they have kids in a room and they give them a breakfast and they give them a lunch, and we've been supporting that. I got to tell you though, we did real hard on the first 2 weeks for Urban Ministries. We're at $706 so far for Interfaith Food Shuttle, and I think we might could do a little push for that. I got a metric from him of how much that helps, how many meals that buys. It's 368 meals, which is pretty dramatic because they've got their system set in place. But you got to think that's half of 1 day's worth of meals that we're doing. So I want to encourage you on this last week of our food drive to take a look at your table or on the board. I can take a check from you today. You can mail it to me, or we can do a QR code online payment with that. That's on the brochure right there. But every dollar Interfaith Food Shuttle is getting from all of their programs is going straight to summer hunger right now. That's all they're doing. That's all they're focusing on. And so this is a great mission for us to tap into. And we have been successful. And I just want to thank you for generosity. And I'll leave it at that.
Hugh, thank you for your leadership on that. We appreciate it so much. And please give to the summer food program. And as he said, either using the brochure on your table with the bar on it that you can reach them through the code on your phone in that bar, or with a check to Hugh today. We do appreciate it. We need your help on that. Also, you'll notice there was a table set up in the back. It'll be set up afterwards. We're giving out tickets to our pancake breakfast, which is October the 21st. This is our largest fundraiser of the year. We did over $30,000 for the pancake breakfast last year. So each of you are getting a packet of tickets. We're asking you to contribute at least that much to the breakfast, and to do that just as soon as possible. Again, you can do that online, or you can do it by check that you can bring in next week. But the pancake breakfast is very important. This year, Jason Tyson is our volunteer chairman. And Jason had to leave to run back to work, but please remember to work with Jason and to help him and the other people who are involved with the pancake breakfast. Next month will be our membership drive month, and Robert Cooper is in charge of that. Robert, we appreciate your leadership, and we look forward to hearing more about the membership drive as that month gets here. Anything you have today, Robert? We've got a microphone for you in just a second. Here we go.
If every member brought just one new member, we would double our membership. I mean, how hard is that?
That's easy.
And Stacy and I are offering a $250 English Barn gift certificate for the person that brings in the most new members between September and the end of the year. So get to work.
Well, Robert, we appreciate that, and we also appreciate the fact that you recognize that Stacy's not here this week, and you raised the price from $100 to $250 in her absence, but that's okay. She'd be happy to give that other amount in there. No, it was $250 last week. I know that very much. Any other announcements or anything that we might add before our program? For our program today, we're going to ask former Senator John Alexander to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Buck. Our guest speaker today is a lady that I met some years ago out at the legislature. I've served there for 6 years, and during those 6 years, she was up and down the halls doing a little bit of this and that and the other. She had this heavy camera that she'd come dragging in the mornings in a nice outfit and whatever else, and and you'd see that camera and her all around, either in the sessions or in committee meetings or wherever anything she thought might be going on. And then when I get at home and watch something like Capitol News tonight, there she is, the same person, the same outfit, same whatever else. However, the TV makeup is kind of on there a little bit, which she probably put on in a committee room because she had to keep listening to what was going on in the committee, and hoping maybe something important would be said. Oftentimes it wasn't, but nevertheless, she still had to cover it. And I would say this, while I was there, she had a reputation as to being the most honest and thorough and transparent and dependable journalist of any kind in any media, with very little competition from any written media that we might have in our area. But she was the type of person that most anybody, any politician or officer would sit down and listen and talk to Loretta Boniti, because they knew that she was going to report it as it was, with no tilting one way or the other. And then if you ever got asked to be on Capitol News Tonight, as I was a couple of times, I always had Tim Boyum interviewing me, and you ran into the same thing there. So most people in the legislature were happy to deal with Spectrum and Capitol 14, and because they knew whatever they got said would be as authenticated as possible. Now I'm going to read what she wrote. I know it ought to. Mine's better. I can promise you that. Loretta Boniti is an award-winning. Can you do some larger fonts and double space next time? Loretta Boniti is an award-winning anchor and senior political reporter with Spectrum News 1. She hosts a weekly public affairs program that covers all the issues important to the folks across North Carolina, called In Focus with Loretta Boniti. How long did it take you to come up with that name? Okay, she has been reporting on all the big legislative, election, and state government issues across the state for over a decade now, and we had previous experience covering politics in both Virginia and Georgia. Loretta is a New York native, welcome, and a Syracuse University graduate. Loretta Boniti from Spectrum News.
Well, with that introduction, I feel like I have to be very careful to be very fair during this entire presentation. So I decided that I would talk to you guys about, because listen, it's probably the bane of my existence, this term fake news, but it's so often on the forefront in today's world, especially when we talk about political news. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about what it's like to cover politics these days. I titled this Unbiased Political Coverage in the Age of Rage and Ranting, because I thought that was pretty fair for where we are. I wanted to start with a little bit about me so you have an idea of where I came into this from. I started my career in Georgia. Having grown up in upstate New York, that was an adjustment for me to go to Georgia. I happened to go to a station that did a lot of political reporting, which I had no intention of going into political reporting. When I went to college and I went to Syracuse, I planned on doing sports reporting. I changed a little bit what I was doing. At that time, the congressman from my area was Nathan Deal. He ended up being governor of Georgia several years later. I ran into him many years later and told him it was his fault that I was a political reporter, because he spent time with these reporters who he knew all were directly out of college to explain politics to them. And my big thing about not wanting to cover politics when I was younger was that I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to fairly cover politics because I didn't understand it enough. And I think that's an important line that has to be drawn of, if you actually know what you're talking about with politics, then you can report on it. But if you don't, you shouldn't be reporting on politics. I went from Georgia to Virginia. Virginia is a very interesting place to cover state politics. It's kind of a springboard for Washington, D.C., being so close to it. You often would see legislation in Virginia, and then the next year it would be up in Washington. It's a lot of the same lobbyists that go back and forth between the two. They're testing the ground in the state. So it was definitely a learning experience for me. I happened to be there when Mark Warner was governor, and then Tim Kaine was governor. And then I got to cover Tim Kaine when he was on the vice presidential ticket. Years later, ran into another reporter from Virginia while he was on the stage at the convention, which was very weird. The two of us sat there and watched this guy that we used to interview every day up on that stage. And then I came here 14 years ago, which is starting to be a long time. I think any of you who have been around in politics for a long time, politics has changed dramatically in that amount of time in our state. We've seen different leadership, different way of doing things. But for me, I've always tried to present the news, not to give opinions on the news. So I looked up extreme partisanship when I was working on this presentation, which is defined as strong and sometimes blind adherence to a particular party, faction, cause, or person. And if you're sitting there thinking, oh, the other side is extremely partisan, you're probably right, no matter which side you're on, because we're moving towards that outside on both sides of this. I'm not going to ask you who you're voting for, but raise your hand if you know who you're voting for president in 2024, right now, today. Okay. And raise your hand if you know who you're going to vote for governor in 2024. The fact that this many people right now, no matter what happens between now and 2024, are pretty confident that they know who they're voting for is what, as a journalist, we question sometimes, because there is so much that happens and we learn about people in this amount of time. But it's a reality. People are going to vote for this person that they're comfortable with, that they know about, and don't necessarily listen to what is happening during an election process. I wanted to put this up because I think it's very indicative of what North Carolina looks like right now. This was the last US Senate race here. This is what it looked like, broken down by counties. Obviously, Ted Budd won that race. He's the red, in case you're wondering. The blue was Sherry Beasley. Obviously, the blue areas are our big cities. They're going to fall in there. Charlotte is going to fall in there. Raleigh is going to fall in there. Wilmington is going to fall in these blue areas. And you look at this and you say, oh, we're definitely a Republican state. But then if you look at the numbers over on the side, you can see we're actually only separated by about 200,000 votes, which is not that many in the total votes that are cast. North Carolina, even looking at this map, we are truly a purple state still. When you look at the voters in North Carolina right now, this is who I'm talking to when I do stories. We have over 7 million voters in North Carolina. We crossed over 2 years ago that we now are, our highest number of voters are unaffiliated voters. That number is climbing. It's getting bigger and bigger and pulling away from the Republicans and Democratic voters in the state. And it makes it hard for us in a couple ways. We don't necessarily know how those voters are going to vote. And because we don't know how they're going to vote, when polling is done, they're often not called in polls, or they don't often answer the polls. So everybody keeps saying polls are wrong now. You can't figure anything out by polls, which is, as a journalist, we often used polls. We can't necessarily use them as much anymore because unaffiliated voters often won't participate because they know if they answer a question, they're going to give away which party they might be voting for. I don't think anybody's surprised by this graphic. Does mass media report news fully and accurately? I think there's a lot of people who feel like in the last 8 years, 6 years, Republicans have turned against the media. The fact of the matter is Republicans for quite some time have felt as though the media is not covering them accurately. When you look at this back to 2019, Republicans were already under 20% thinking that the media covered accurately. I look at this and say, well, gee, they're all going down, which is concerning as somebody who does this, but there's reasons that people don't trust the media anymore. And a lot of it is that they don't feel like stories are completely told. You're not giving us the full picture on something. I asked the question of which came first, the chicken or the egg. So you have a politician who doesn't like what is said in a news story, be it in a print version or a television version. So I'm not going to talk to that media because they're clearly skewed. I have the same politician who wonders why their perspective is never covered by the news. And this is truly something that we face all the time, that people don't like stories that they're seeing or hearing or reading about, but they won't talk to you because they don't like the stories that they're seeing or reading or hearing about. And then how are you supposed to put that perspective in? And so we are really caught in this cycle right now that people will go to Republican, we all know there's Republican leaning news organizations or Democratic leaning news organizations. Democrats go to the Democratic ones, Republicans go to the Republican ones. And then we are lost of not having a full story on anything. So I sat here for a second and looked at this when I said, so what should a good journalist be? And I decided fair, accurate, and objective. And it's the objective part that a lot of people think that most journalists today aren't. The reason being is that there's so often that you're seeing opinion inserted into stories or into what you're seeing on TV. But I think what has happened in the age of cable news is that people don't know what the difference is between a journalist and a pundit. And I'm not blaming the audience for not knowing what the difference is, because I don't think that it's clearly defined to people, but the journalist is the one who should only be reporting the facts and giving context to readers and viewers about a story. This is what this bill does. This is how it could affect you. Here is why this person is voting for it. Here's why this person isn't voting for it. A pundit, or as I like to call them, talking heads, give their opinions about this. They will say, here's the, yeah, okay, those are what the facts are. Now, based on my opinion, this is what it is. And most people that people don't like are these pundits. It's not the journalists that there is concerned about, it's the pundits. And these stations are putting pundits on and not clearly defining them, that this isn't one of our journalists. And I think that this is where a lot of the mistrust in media is coming from, and it's our own fault that we're not defining it for the marketplace. But as a journalist, which is what I am, it makes it hard to do your job. Anybody who's ever heard me speak before has heard me say this before. Twitter is the bane of my existence. I'm old enough, I've been doing this long enough, and it's not just Twitter, it's any social media. But politics shifted as soon as this became possible. I looked to see what the most recent number of how many people on Twitter, just since most people are familiar with it, 330 million people were on Twitter as of yesterday. So that's 330 million people who have a platform to put their idea out there, whatever they want. I personally think it's a problem because this is in 200 characters is where a lot of those 330 million people are getting their news from. And they're basing their entire opinion on something on that short character count. They're not clicking to something else. They're not turning on a news station. They're not going and buying a newspaper to see what the rest of the story is. Those 200 characters, that's their definition of it. Politics changed through social media because We saw the rise of hashtag campaigns where if you put a hashtag on something, I don't know if any of you have TweetDeck, if you've heard of that, that you can set it up. So if there's a hashtag for NC poll, you can see everything for North Carolina politics that's being done, or the North Carolina Senate race, there's always a hashtag for, or education. So people will write whatever they want to, and if they know that they're putting a hashtag on it that is going to get them in front of certain viewers, they just put that hashtag onto it. So right there, we're already defining that only a hashtag that you're following you might see. And then there's the @ filtering, where you're picking and choosing which voices you want to hear. Guess what? If you are conservative and agree with conservative voices, the chances of you following somebody who's going to give you the other perspective, pretty small. So again, you're once again only seeing what you want to see, which is the same thing that we're seeing with TV, with the newspapers that people are picking. Social media, the reason that I have a problem with it is it's so quick. You really I've been on Twitter, I don't know how many times since I've sat down here to check to see if there was anything on it. And you just read the headline and you've made your decision and you've moved on with your day. And when somebody asks you about something, you have your decision made. Real life versus TV life. No matter how many politicians I talk to, they will tell you that their persona on TV is not their real life persona. We will watch people fight with each other on TV. I'm talking more Congress than I am at the legislature. I don't watch you guys fight quite as much at the legislature on TV with each other. But then they'll go out to dinner with each other that night. And I said, Speaker of the House race 2023, and pulled up images from it. I've talked to a lot of people who are sitting in that room those days as those vote after vote after vote was taking place. These are the images that most people remember from what was going on during this. And listen, I've talked to Representative Hudson about this image in particular, and we all look at these images and just assume that it's just complete chaos and nobody wants to get along with each other. And then I talked to a lot of our members of Congress, and all of them are telling me, well, yeah, we were actually all, we were in the new session, there's a lot of new members. We were actually all getting to know each other during this time and sitting around talking in our small groups during this time. And one of our members of Congress said they watched somebody go give a really, really divisive speech at the microphone, and then came back and sat down with him in the other party. They were opposite parties, and he said, you just gave quite a speech, and he's like, oh yeah, that was for the cameras. And that's a reality, is that's for the cameras. And I say this because as somebody who's trying to cover this and explain to people what's going on and why these laws are important, and maybe you should pay attention to, this executive order that just came down. This might affect you, or this tax cut. What is this actually going to mean here? This right here, these images, is really what people are paying attention to in politics. And many politicians know this. And so they want you to remember these images. And don't take this to be any of the politicians in these actual pictures. I had to pick a day that I was doing for it. And so, like I said, I think anybody who's been in the legislature would tell you most lawmakers actually get along fairly well. I run into lawmakers around Raleigh all the time of opposite parties that are having dinner together or went out to grab a drink together, and the next day they show up at the legislature and completely argue the opposite sides of an issue, vote completely different from each other. In Congress, a lot of the same thing happens. It's just on a much larger scale. And as a political reporter and as somebody who wants people to know what's going on, this is a trend that I think is the most important trend for us to reverse. There has to be a way for us to correct this, to stop making it a soap opera on TV. And listen, I take responsibility as somebody who has a TV camera. But there has to be a way to correct this if we want our country to start paying attention to what the laws are versus what's going on with that. So all of this is to say, when I'm writing a story, I see a new bill is filed, and I've got to decide, okay, how am I going to present this to folks? I sit there and I read the bill. I think about the people who are the sponsors of the bill. Sometimes that's very telling, who you see actually written on a bill together. I often will try to talk to the people who wrote the bill, get a little bit of the behind the scenes, and then I have to decide what matters from this. Does what the actual content of the bill, is that the most important part of it? Does the people who are working together on this bill, is that the most important part of it? And it truly is sometimes one of the most important parts of it. And then, does it matter what negotiation is going into that? We're doing this bill because that will allow this bill to be passed. It takes a lot for me personally to decide exactly how I'm going to cover each one of those pieces of legislation. But I've been doing this for a number of years, and on the state level, I can do it fairly quickly. I know when something is new, different, really being affected. Congressional level, it's a lot murkier what's going on there. But I think the long and short of it is that media today has to find a way to stop only listening to the loudest people, but instead listen to the people who are actually trying to move things forward. Senator Alexander very nicely said that we try to cover things fairly at Spectrum News. This might sound surprising to you, but at the same time, it truly is a conversation that was had when we started Capitol Tonight, which was 12 years ago now, 5 nights a week, we do Capitol Tonight. We sat in a room before we launched the show and said, how are we covering the political news? And the decision unanimously was, we will be down the middle. We will cover both sides. We will invite all parties, not just Republicans and Democrats, Libertarians, anybody else who has a stake in something. We will invite all parties on to say their perspective. And it's a little bit sad. It's a little bit shocking, as somebody who went to school many moons ago, that we had to have that conversation. But in this day and age, you can all sit here and tell me which newspapers are left-leaning, which newspapers are right-leaning, which cable outlets are left-leaning, which ones are right-leaning, which radio stations are giving you left-leaning, which ones are giving you right-leaning. And you can tell me which ones you listen to because of that. And so, like I said, we're trying, and everybody I talk to within the industry is trying to correct this. But I think that we have a really long way to go to figure this out. And I can promise you this, it's not going to happen during the 2024 cycle. It's not. It's already consuming most of my time. What's going on for 2024, that's how much stuff I'm getting, and it's been for several months now, on a daily basis from it, from past presidents, past vice presidents, current politicians, people who are running for the first time for these offices. It's 20, 25 emails a day of different issues, different opinions about things. And it's not going to allow it to correct before this. But I think that the biggest thing that I can say to people is that we want the general public to tell us things. Like, I need emails from people saying, hey, did you know about this? Did you hear about this that the city council is doing? Or did you hear about this that the school board is doing? Or this member of Congress said this today. Did you happen to hear it? We actually really do truly need people to tell us that, because I think it's going to take a group effort to get us back on track to where journalists need to be. And with that, I have left a lot of time because I assume that there are questions for me, and I've been doing this for 25 years. I have a thick skin. You can ask me whatever you want to ask me about how decisions are made or how we would cover something. Because I think the best way to get the general public to understand where we are from our perspective is to actually answer questions about it. So.
Do you have to be a Spectrum customer to receive your news?
So to receive it completely, yes. We have an app that you can sign up for now, that you can get everything free for a month, and then you can just delete it and reload it and get everything free for another month. I didn't tell you that. We're also on Roku now, and we have something called Spectrum News Plus that is starting to be shared. It will soon be on Apple TV. We will soon be on YouTube also, but currently today, if you want to watch our news every day, yes, you have to be a Spectrum News customer.
Wonderful speech today. Thank you very much. But I think you asked the wrong question when you asked us all to raise a hand. Who you voting for?
Yeah.
I'll bet you everybody who raised their hand didn't know who they're going to vote for, but they knew who they were going to vote against. And I can tell you, I will never vote for X, Y, and Z. And I think everybody else would agree with me there.
I think that's very true. And I think that falls into the category of this extreme partisanship that
Yes.
people I don't want that person. So I'll vote this.
And the whole problem with that, when you showed your map, the blue
Yes.
and the red is a gerrymandering. And so there is no way in hell that somebody in that red district is going to ever change their mind to anything that may be blue. They're going to go exactly the way those people want to vote for. And so if there's no contrasting, if you say one word wrong, you're not going to get reelected.
And we love to redistrict here in North Carolina. We do it all the time. And the interesting thing, District 13, our congressional District 13, as it was drawn for this last election, was one of the most competitive races in the country. But what's interesting is it did lean one way, and yet it still was one of the most competitive in the country, because that's across the country how bad people draw these districts for this. But Republicans won power in the legislature after Democrats had drawn districts. So there is an argument that you can. No, I'm talking in the legislature. Yeah, in 2011. Republicans took the legislature with districts Democrats had drawn. No, that's 2020. You're talking 2022. I'm talking 2011.
I've got a question. What explains? Oh,
And you need to wait your turn.
oh, excuse me. I yield my time to the representative.
Loretta, I hear this thing called the No Labels Party that's being advocated, I guess, by former Governor McCrory.
Yes.
And based on the demographic that you had up there, what do you think about that? Now McCrory says we will be on the ballot.
Right. So with that unaffiliated number that we have in the state that's growing, the reality is, and we all know this, the reality is people lean one way or the other. Most people in that unaffiliated group are voting Republican or Democrat. They just don't want to announce which way that they're voting. There's a lot of people who think if there's ever going to be a third party, 2024 might be the year for it, because there's so many people who are so tired of the extreme partisanship. But for somebody to be able to rise up out of the middle and actually capture people and convince them, if you vote for me in the middle, that other guy that you don't like over here isn't going to win. And this guy over here that you do kind of like also, isn't going to lose if you vote for the middle. I think it's a really hard stretch. I think McCrory, he's going to work on it. And I think he truly believes this at this point. He's not the only one who thinks that we need to find something in the middle ground. Do I think that we'll actually see a winner from that? No. I don't think we're there yet, because I don't think people are ready to believe that enough people will vote there, that guy that they really don't like on this side won't win if I vote for the guy in the middle.
I've got a question. Can you explain the news media's complete love affair with global warming as the cause of all evil on the earth?
I think, this is going to be one of those cases where I think that one side has done a lot better job of communicating their side than the other side has. When you have scientists coming to you and saying, this is something that I can show you graphs, I can show you charts, I can show you this, and this is why global warming is something that we're so concerned about, and you need to be talking about this more, and you need to make sure people understand this. But it took years and years before the other side said, well, wait a minute, let me show you different graphs and different charts, and why we don't think that this chart is actually telling the true story. I think there's a lot of things you could come up with, different topics, that this is the case, that there's one side that's much more prepared to present the information, and the other side plays catch up. And sometimes it takes them a really long time to play catch up. That being said, listen, I've seen the charts. I have a hard time. At this point, you would have to convince me otherwise, because I've been reporting on it for long enough now. But like I said, I think there's a lot of topics that are like this that have happened. And then the other side comes forward and says, well, wait a second, why aren't you ever saying this? And it's like, well, because you've never said anything that you don't think that this is correct. So that's my best answer that I can give you for it. I don't think it's a lack of doing research, it's a lack of the other research being there. Yes.
Hey there. I understand if you want truly objective news, you need to watch Spectrum News. If you have a subscription. But this is more of your opinion. As far as looking for more of a printed news sources and looking at where would you go, for example, the Associated Press, or where would you go for print to get in-depth, as objective journalism as you can, as far as print goes, where they can put more time and effort into their stories? Thank you.
So I'll tell you, this is how I'm going to answer this question, because prior to going to college, and listen, I graduated 24 years ago, so we were not in the same place that we are right now in journalism. I will tell you, at Syracuse, they made it mandatory that every journalism freshman had 5 subscriptions to newspapers, because their opinion at that time, 24 years ago, well, 27 years ago, was that there was none that were completely reliable. So you needed multiple sources, and they wanted us to get used to reading multiple sources. I will say as a general rule, I do find the Associated Press to do the most research on their stories. That being said, good grief, pay attention to your local newspapers in the investigative units. It's the only place that you're still finding investigative reporters for close to home stories that they're given 2 months to work on a story. You know, I'm given 6 hours to work on a story. Local newspapers that do investigations, and we have a couple in this state who still have units that do that. That's where I find, if I'm going to do anything, if I'm looking at anything local, that's who I'm looking at. If I'm looking for big picture, and having sat next to Associated Press reporters for years in different newsrooms, I listen as their information comes in from different states. They actually daily have reporters from different states who compare information on things. They have editors whose job it is, they cut stories all the time because they don't have enough of two sides of something. And listen, I'm not saying everything is perfect with it. Sure, there's stories that I've seen run by the Associated Press that I'm like, well, you missed this part of this story. I think the biggest hole that North Carolina has had in journalists is when Mark Binker passed away several years ago. He was probably the best reporter in North Carolina as far as doing investigations, getting all of the facts for stories. I remember after he died, that Senator Berger said to me he had no idea if Mark was a Republican or a Democrat, and he had covered him for like 15 years. It's left a hole in North Carolina to not have that. But I do implore you to not give up on your local newspapers, but look for the stories that are more investigative.
Let me come at this another way. I recall a market study on share of audience. I think it was in the Boston market where there were multiple TV stations. Mm-hmm. And over a 20-year cycle, the stations would cover more and more killings and car wrecks and blood, and there would be a race to the bottom until finally people started to lose audience. And some stations decided, we're done, we're going back to the top, and the market would change again for a while. Mm-hmm. Now, given that analogy, do you see that something like that can happen on the political side, where people are so tuned out on the far right and far left media? Yes. That there's an opening for the middle?
Most of us who are involved in it think that that's what's going to happen. We don't think it will happen in the 2024 cycle, but we think at some point here that we're getting to the point that enough people don't want to hear the opinions and the extremes that at some point it's going to take that cycle back up to the top for that very reason. Somebody needs to step out from it and say, watch this, I can do good journalism and cover the issues and get everybody to watch me. And I don't need to do the car wreck of politics for it. Yes, I do.
Thank you, Loretta. We appreciate it. Thank you for being with us today. I've got a book I want you to sign. We give a book to the local library system for children, and appreciate you signing that. We're going to present it in your honor and in your name. Well, thank all of you for being with us today. Next week, we have a very good program, and if I can remember what it is, I'll tell you about it. It's a Meredith golf team. The Meredith golf team, the two ladies that, and they've entitled their presentation, Playing Golf with Determination. And it is determination because when they played their first game, they scored over 200 points each, not together, each. They were terrible. And they ended up making the golf team because of determination. So it's a good program to see. Thank you all for being with us today. Have a good time. Take care. Goodbye.